Well, this is chapter 9 of Converging Media. This is on advertising and public relations and the power of persuasion. One of the problems that I have with this book is this book actually makes the assertion that the notion of direct effects, that mass communication has a direct effect on the consumer of it, has been largely disproven, quote unquote. That's just sort of vaguely said in one of the early chapters. I may have already addressed that. If I did, I probably already addressed the fact that I don't buy it. If that is true, then we would not have a chapter on advertising and public relations, because if there was not a direct effect, if advertising did not lead to sales, if public relations did not lead to changes in how people think about people and companies, there would be no advertising and public relations. But it does. It does have an effect. Advertising, of course, strategic communications linked by an emphasis on persuasion and a big picture view, sometimes informed by research. Advertising, of course, is the most prevalent form of media content paid for for-profit or non-profit organizations, political campaigns, wealthy individuals trying to influence public opinion, trying to get people to buy things. There's a lot of that goes on. Public relations material, though, is thought of more as not purchase content, but rather earned media. However, we do know that public relations companies have gotten inroads into news companies and news sources, and they've gotten news sources through treating them to whatever it might be, news editors and other people. They've influenced what has gone on the air. That is something that a public relations company sometimes can do. So sometimes it is earned media. Sometimes it's really a little more than advertising as well when you see public relations about somebody. Talks about strategic communications aiming to persuade an audience to think or behave as the communicator wishes. The most important factor of successful persuasion is accurately knowing and understanding the audience. We have to know what motivates the audience. And of course, in large part, as I sometimes tell my speech communication class about their audience, the audience wants to know what's in it for me. How does this relate to my life? How is it going to help me in my life? Strategic communications attempt to persuade audience in a certain way. Talks on the next page about persuasive communications and rhetoric being the art of persuasion, different theories of persuasive communication, models of persuasion have come into being, certain assumptions about how our thoughts and emotions affect our behavior. Our behavior and actions are somehow linked to what it is we believe we know about the world. Our attitudes, beliefs, and values affect our behavior. How we process information affects what messages we find persuasive sometimes. Persuaders' credibility, authority, and attractiveness all can contribute to successful persuasion. Now, I don't know exactly how this relates, but of course, on page 262 of the book is the first time in my entire time of teaching, and I've taught for years out of many books. I've taught many topics out of many books, and this is the first textbook with a picture of a woman in it with no clothes on, a naked woman. So very strange. Talks about, on this particular one, it talks about underneath it, talking about large range of factors can make an ad as persuasive as possible. Well, that's true, but this is one of those things where people are trying to tell people don't wear fur. It says fur, I'd rather go naked. I'm not quite sure that could have persuaded someone not to wear fur, but okay. One of the major things that we need to know about, though, in terms of how advertising affects behavior is this whole theory of cognitive dissonance. It is a theory of persuasion that says we act first and then we rationalize or create reasons for our behavior afterwards in order to make our actions consistent with our own self-perceived notions of who we are. So if we do something and deep in the back of our mind, we know we shouldn't have done that one. What happens is we then start rationalizing that behavior. One time they did a study that found that, and I don't know how they did the study, but I remember reading it, that 70% of our mental activity is spent rationalizing our own behavior to ourselves. That's a little odd tidbit for you. The role of media in persuasion, there has to be awareness first. The very first step in the process of persuasion, especially on media, is just awareness. Until you know that a product exists, you're rarely going to go out and just, well, obviously you won't go out and buy a product unless you know it exists. Could be because you saw it in the store. Could be because you saw it on television, radio, media, post, billboards, whatever it may be. Again, here's where they talked about the direct effects model having been largely disproved. still believe media can influence the public in certain ways. The direct effects model has not been largely disproved. In fact, the mass of effects research, especially mass communication effects research, finds that there are very real and very direct effects on people's values and their behavior. They've done a lot of study of even things such as pornography and how it affects people's marriages. They know that there's an effect. They've done studies of the different smoking campaigns trying to get people to smoke less, how little effect some of those had, but how much effects others have. Advertising, of course, goes way back. It's about an ancient form of communication. Sponsored, paid-for commercial message designed to inform and persuade people to buy a good or service or accept a point of view or act in some fashion desired by the sender. It is the business of selling mass audience to the advertiser. There are different ways that can happen, by the way. People can pay for a certain amount of time for being on the air. They can also pay for performance-based advertising, especially on the internet, where the advertisers pay for results only. It's you click on that page and then the advertiser has to pay a certain amount. That can lead, by the way, to people who don't like a certain product, can go to pages that have advertisements for that product or that company. And in mass, people can start clicking on that, but then never buying anything. And all they're doing is racking up the bill for that company without them getting the results of it in their pocket. So anyway, search engine marketing now is they're paying for companies to come up and go look at Google, and you search for something. You will notice that a certain number of things that come up are going to say, it's going to say ad on it or paid ad or something to that effect. Talks about historical development of advertising. The printed press, of course, in the 15th century gave rise to mass communication, including posters, flyers, and broadsheets that sometimes were advertising, of course. Ads became a mainstay for U.S. firms marketing products and services in the mid-1800s, and especially in terms of advertising in newspapers. In the early 20th century, the number of mass-produced and packaged goods expanded along with the automobile industry. And the automobile industry today is the largest advertiser. They're the largest advertiser, followed by retail, business, and consumer services. Advertising agencies sprang up, who then took money from people to create an advertising campaign that would then help their product. Electronic media in the 20th century became a huge source for the advertising industry, radio and television, as well as newspapers and magazines and billboards. Online advertising is the fastest growing segment of advertising today, and you probably knew that. Talks about commercial television. In the 60s, ABC expanded the station break between programs from 30 to 40 seconds to increase profits. Other networks soon followed. Within a few years, the standard commercial length reached 1 minute. And then, of course, it's become larger and larger and larger and larger. I was watching a TV show the other day, and I believe that almost half of it was advertising. It was bizarre. There might have been 18 minutes of television show, and I promise you, there had to be 12 minutes of advertising, which is bizarre in my opinion. I believe that is one of the reasons, and this is something that broadcasters look at and maybe change, maybe increase their price, but lower the number of ads. I believe this is one reason for the just huge explosion of the popularity of these streaming services where you can watch something like Hulu. My wife and I watch a number of things on Hulu or Netflix or one of these others. You can watch it without advertising. I actually signed up for the Disney Plus thing. I was going to get the package. And so that way you've got ESPN, you've got Disney Plus, you've got something else, and you've got Hulu. Only problem was Hulu had advertising. That's not what I wanted. So I canceled it, bought Hulu by itself, and bought Disney Plus by itself. Anyway, Disney Plus, if you're listening, that's for you. Going forward, talks about the fact that networks began to do piggybacking running messages for two related products from one company in the same 1 minute commercial. Infomercials, of course, started becoming a large amount of content on television. That was in the late 60s, early 70s, and it grew even larger, much, much larger. There are dozens of channels of just infomercials, as you know, dozens of channels of just infomercials on the air, especially on cable and DirecTV and other things like that today. Along the line, they banned cigarette advertising. I still remember cigarette advertising. Of course, the internet began as a resolutely non-commercial space. That changed. Banner ads, pop-up ads, all kinds of things along that line. The rise of branding. Branding is the process of creating in the consumer's mind a clear identity for a particular company's product, logo, or trademark, or for a person and their particular image that they want to create. Catchy slogans, distinctive visual identities, advertising across multiple media, all of these things. So successful were some advertising campaigns that their brand names became synonymous with the product itself. I still call tissues a Kleenex because Kleenex was the biggest tissue seller for decades. And when I think about a tissue, facial tissue, the word I call it is the Kleenex, whether it's a Kleenex brand or not. The word Xerox became generic with photocopying, which brands are almost always trademarked. Branding is important to individuals as well, as I mentioned earlier, and it's talked about in the next section here of the book. Celebrities fiercely guard their brands, likenesses, and even their names from infringement by others. Going over to the next page, selling products and selling ideas. Social marketing is marketing where we encourage the public to transform behaviors and behave in a better way, to behave in a more positive way. And that's a very big thing, especially on social media, by the way. Social marketing is really big on social media. But you see the same thing on television as well. Passiton.org. There are some others that do these PR ads trying to get people to be nicer to other people. Fear appeals sometimes shock people into changing their behavior, but fear appeals also have a limited life shelf. They do. After a certain amount of fear, people just go, okay, well, whatever. I'm just going to go do this or that. And that's something that people... a lot of people have said that this is starting to happen with this COVID issue, where people are saying, "Well, I'm not going to sit in my apartment and just be afraid for it. I'm just going to go out and take my chances." And I've actually heard people say things along that line. Heard that expressed. Talked about public service announcements, advertising channels. Of course, it's just advertising now. Some of them are print media had classified advertising and display advertising, and they have really had trouble keeping up their paid advertising, display advertising, because the circulation of so many newspapers has dropped so much. Electronic media, talked about the subliminal advertising becoming a big thing, where they flash messages or brief images to produce an unconscious effect on the viewer. Product placement is a huge thing now, because of the fact that many people have a DVR and they're fast forwarding past the ads on their DVR. They have the product placement where the product is actually in the show. If you look, they have a picture from American Idol, which every judge has a Coca-Cola cup in front of them. Outdoor advertising, of course, is a large thing. You see it across the United States on every highway, byway, interstate. There are some places, though, that ban billboards. Some places you go, why are there no billboards? There are certain places that ban billboards because they know that it closes up the view. Of course, direct mail has been popular. It's still popular to some degree. It's not as popular as it once was, although direct mail email, spam email, that's still hugely popular, which costs people less than it does to actually mail it to you. Talks about advertising in this digital world. Email marketing, talks about cookies being planted on your computer where they then monitor what it is you do so they know what to advertise to you. Banner ads have a click-through rate where every time you click on that banner ad, I mentioned this before, there's a company you don't like and you click on their banner ad over and over and over again, there's the amount of times where it's going to cost them some money. It's about pop-ups, classified and auction sites, Craigslist. I've sold a number of things myself on Craigslist, eBay, people sell things on there. Search engine ads we talked about already. Mobile advertising now. Ads on your phone. Of course, we know that's a rising thing. We talked about viral marketing already. I'm not going to go into that anymore. Going forward into the big winner in advertising right now is the internet. It is growing. From 2011 to 2015, internet advertising grew by 45%. It's probably grown a great deal more since that time. And talks about advertising agencies. We're not going to get into that. If that's an area you're interested in, go through those pages. Public relations, some people call it the world's second oldest profession. People have been doing things and having people do things and guiding people to do things that make them look better for decades, centuries, who knows, possibly longer. Often press agents and that type of thing, public relations known for special events and publicity stunts. Pay attention next time you see a news story where you see something about a famous person who went and did some charitable work or gave away money or things along that line. A lot of times that's something where they've got a press relations specialist who's telling them Well, you need something positive said about you right now. Get your name back into the national eye, so maybe they go out and they work on a house for Habitat for Humanity, or they go and but some of those celebrities go out and do some of these nice things. They actually go out and do them without wanting any publicity about it. There was one, well, it's fairly famous person, Michael Jordan, who was playing for the Birmingham Barons, and he ran across this little league field that's in horrendous shape, and he said, "Tell you what I'll do, I'll donate the money to help you fix this up as long as you don't ever tell anybody." Well, he donated the money, they fixed it up, and then someone told someone. He was not happy with it. He actually let them know, "I'm sorry, don't ask me to donate to another little league field associated with your group because I told you I'd help this field. Of course, there may have been the chance he'd help others, but I didn't want you to tell anybody what they did." Anyway, trends in the development of public relations. We're not going to get into that right now. If that's interesting to go into there. Talks about PR and media relations. One of the things you should know about is pseudo events. Pseudo events. That's where it looks like an event, but really it's just advertising. It looks like they're giving someone an award. Sometimes people have someone give them an award and they do a big press thing and a party and all this other stuff. And the people who gave them the award, it's really a company that was just created to give them the award. And now they have the award, they have the publicity, and the company disappears. You know this. You probably know this better than I do. Going forward, talks about, jump forward to changing trends in advertising in PR, integrated communications, trying to manage a brand across media channels while learning what the public is saying about the brand, social media listening, social media monitoring. Huge things now. We talked about it earlier already. Talked about media careers and the different things that you can do. I'll tell you something. Social media especially has created a world in which people can actually create their own jobs. People can create their own brand. There are people who are paid a lot of money right now so that people can watch them play video games, which I don't quite understand, but it's very popular. That is the end of that chapter. That's the end of chapter 9. We'll work on chapter 10 here shortly.